Billionaire Elon Musk, known for his high-profile meetings and world-changing innovations, never expects to find himself at a rundown gas station in the middle of nowhere. But tonight, that's exactly where he is. It's late at night, and Elon has been driving for hours, lost in thought about Tesla's latest breakthroughs and the future of SpaceX. His car is running low on fuel, so he pulls into a small, outdated gas station on the side of a quiet highway. The station looks ancient, with flickering lights and worn-out pumps that appear as if they haven't been updated in decades. As Elon steps out of his car, stretching his legs and breathing in the cool night air, he feels a momentary disconnect. Usually, his life is filled with high-stakes meetings, world-changing conversations, and the cutting-edge technologies he's helping create. But tonight, he's just another man refueling on a long, lonely drive. He takes a moment to inhale the fresh night air, the calmness of the roadside almost surreal against the chaos of his usual routine. There's something strangely grounding about it, as though the world has momentarily paused for him to catch a breath. The gas station itself feels trapped in time. The dim lights from the old fluorescent bulbs buzz quietly, casting long shadows across the cracked concrete. It's the kind of place you'd expect to see in a forgotten town, out of place and out of sync with the rapid pace of innovation he's used to. A faint smell of gasoline lingers in the air, mixing with the scent of the cool evening breeze. As he steps inside, Elon notices a young man behind the counter. The clerk, likely in his late 20s, looks up without the typical awe or recognition that usually accompanies encounters with Elon Musk. Instead, the young man offers a polite but neutral nod. There's a brief flicker of surprise in his eyes when he realizes who it is, but he doesn't let it show. No wide-eyed admiration, no excited chatter. Just a calm, almost indifferent demeanor. It feels different to Elon, almost unsettling. This reaction, or lack thereof, catches Elon off guard. For someone who's used to being treated like a celebrity, the coolness of this young man is odd, but it also gives him a strange sense of relief. No fanfare, no expectations. Just a quiet, unremarkable moment in the middle of nowhere. Feeling out of place in his own world for once, Elon steps further into the dimly lit store. The small talk he often relies on to break the ice feels forced in this unfamiliar setting. "Long shift?" he asks, trying to make conversation. The clerk, whose name is Chris, responds without skipping a beat. "Yeah, just another night. Keeps me busy, though." Elon nods, looking at Chris more intently now, trying to gauge the young man's personality. The conversation drifts to casual topics, Elon mentioning how long his drive has been and the quiet of the night. But there's something about Chris's calm demeanor that sticks with him. Elon's curiosity is piqued. This interaction feels like it's moving in a different direction than the usual fan encounters he's accustomed to. At some point, Chris looks up from the counter, scanning Elon's face for recognition. Then, with a slight tilt of his head, he asks, "You look familiar. Are you someone important?" Elon smiles, sensing an opportunity to keep the mystery alive for just a little longer. "I suppose I've done a few things here and there." Chris chuckles softly, not buying into any of the usual grandeur. "Well, I don't really follow that stuff, just trying to get by, but I do like learning new things on my own time." There it is, a response that's entirely different from what Elon is used to. Instead of fawning over him, Chris's response feels grounded. He's not starstruck. He's not impressed by Elon's fame or status. Instead, he's just another person, living his life and focused on his own path. Elon, intrigued by Chris's indifference, presses on. "What kind of things do you learn?" he asks, genuinely curious. Chris looks around as if checking to see if anyone's listening, then leans slightly closer as if sharing a secret. Mostly tech stuff, AI, computer programming, space. I don't have a fancy degree, but I learn from books and online courses. I've even built a few things, though I'm still working on my projects. Elon's interest is instantly piqued. Here's a self-taught man working in a small gas station who's teaching himself concepts that many of the world's best minds are still grappling with. Like what? Elon presses, now leaning in to hear more. Chris hesitates for a moment, then opens up. I've been working on a self-learning AI system. It's a basic prototype right now, but it adapts to different inputs over time. It's not much, but it works. Elon stares at him, his curiosity growing. He can see the raw potential in Chris's words, in the simplicity of his project. "You built this on your own?" he asks, almost incredulously. Chris nods proudly, his eyes lighting up for the first time in the conversation. "Yeah, I just started with what I could find online, learning bit by bit. It took time, but I'm getting somewhere with it." Elon can't help but be impressed. This young man, with no formal training, has created something that most people would need years of schooling to even understand. This could be the moment that changes everything. As Chris continues to explain his AI project, Elon realizes that this unexpected pit stop is more than just a fuel break. It might just be the beginning of something far more significant. Elon leans against the counter, his gaze still fixed on Chris. There's a quiet intensity in the air now. For once, he's not thinking about deadlines or global plans. Instead, he's drawn to the mystery of the young man standing in front of him. It's strange to find someone like Chris, who seems both unremarkable yet full of potential, working in a place like this. The hum of the gas station, the buzz of the flickering lights, and the occasional sound of tires crunching on the gravel outside all seem to fade into the background as the two men continue their conversation. Elon, ever the seeker of minds that think differently, feels an undeniable pull to understand what drives Chris. "So you've built this AI on your own, huh?" Elon's tone is measured, a mixture of curiosity and genuine respect. "Most people with your skill would be working for a tech company by now." Chris shrugs again, his demeanor still relaxed, but there's a quiet pride in his eyes. "I never really thought about working for someone else. I've always liked doing things on my own. I guess I'm still figuring out where all this fits." Elon nods thoughtfully, his mind already processing the possibilities. It's clear Chris doesn't crave the fame or the accolades. He's driven by something deeper, something more intrinsic. The world that Elon inhabits, where everything moves at breakneck speed and attention is a currency, feels almost alien here. It's oddly refreshing. There's a slight pause as Chris pulls out a small, battered laptop from behind the counter. The device seems out of place in the otherwise mundane surroundings of the gas station, but to Chris, it's a portal to something bigger. As he opens it up and taps a few keys, the screen flickers to life, displaying a simple interface, a basic AI model, but functional. Elon watches as Chris explains the system with a level of comfort that suggests he's talked about it before, but not often. "It's still early," Chris continues, "but it learns from the data you give it, adapts and evolves over time. I'm still refining it, but it's working. It's just a start, but it's something." Elon leans in closer, inspecting the prototype. His mind races, connecting dots, considering how something like this could be developed further. "This could revolutionize adaptive technology," he says, his voice dropping lower with the weight of the thought. "It's got potential. A lot of it." Chris looks down at his laptop, a slight flush creeping onto his face. The praise is unexpected, and it's clear he's not used to being in the spotlight. His fingers hover nervously over the keyboard, as if unsure whether he should be sharing something so personal with someone like Elon. But Elon's encouragement feels genuine, not like the usual dismissive nods from people who don't take him seriously. "You really think so?" Chris asks, his voice softer now. "Absolutely," Elon responds, his tone confident. "It's raw, sure, but that's the best part. Raw potential can go in so many directions. You could push this further. If you're interested, we could talk about taking it to the next level." Chris's eyes widen. There's a brief silence as he processes Elon's words. The weight of the offer hangs in the air, tangible yet impossible to grasp. A self-taught programmer, working alone in a small gas station, suddenly finding himself at the precipice of an opportunity most would kill for. The magnitude of the moment is not lost on him, but the reality of it seems almost surreal. He runs a hand through his hair, unsure of how to respond. "I don't know. I mean, I never thought I'd be talking to someone like you about something like this. This isn't really my world." Elon gives a small, knowing smile. "I didn't think it would be mine either, until I found out how much power there is in unexpected places. You don't need a fancy title or a degree to make a difference, Chris. Sometimes the most innovative ideas come from people who've never been told they couldn't do something." Chris absorbs the words quietly, the weight of them slowly sinking in. His gaze drops to the worn-out counter, and for a moment, he seems to be lost in thought. The offer is a dream, one he's been silently working toward for years but never expected to reach so suddenly. A career built on self-taught skills, honed in the quiet of a gas station at night. Now, it feels like everything is about to change. He looks back up at Elon, his expression unreadable for a moment before a small, almost incredulous smile flickers at the corners of his lips. "You're serious?" he asks, his voice a mix of disbelief and curiosity. Elon's response is firm, his gaze unwavering. "I wouldn't offer if I wasn't. You've got talent. It's rare. We need people who think outside the box, people who challenge the status quo. If you're ready to take the leap, we'd love to work with you." For a moment, Chris just stands there, processing the words. His mind whirls, considering all the possibilities. It feels like the kind of opportunity you don't just stumble into. It's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing. But the uncertainty, the fear of stepping into a world that's entirely unknown to him, makes the decision even harder. Finally, he speaks, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to say." Elon hands him a business card, his voice calm and patient. "Think it over. No rush. But if you want to take that next step, I'm here." Chris stares at the card, his fingers brushing lightly over it as if trying to comprehend the enormity of what's just been offered. His heart beats faster now, the weight of the moment sinking in. "Thank you," he says, his voice trembling slightly with a mix of excitement and disbelief. "I'll definitely think about it." As Chris looks up from the card, Elon offers a smile that feels both understanding and reassuring, as if to say, "Whatever you decide, it's the right choice." The night outside seems quieter now, as if the world is holding its breath for the decision Chris is about to make. But for now, he's left with the moment, standing in the doorway of a life-altering opportunity, unsure but ready to take that first step. And in that silence, the gas station, with all its faded charm, somehow becomes the starting point for a journey neither of them could have anticipated. The next morning, Chris wakes up to the blaring sound of his alarm, but the weight in his chest isn't from the usual grogginess of a long shift ahead. Instead, it's the conversation with Elon Musk that lingers, hovering over him like an unspoken promise. The business card is still in his pocket, a small, crisp piece of paper that somehow feels heavier than it should. His hands tremble slightly when he pulls it out, staring at Elon's name printed in bold black letters. He takes a deep breath, trying to steady his thoughts. What now? He never expected his life to change overnight, let alone in such an unusual way. A part of him still can't quite grasp the magnitude of the opportunity he's been given. The feeling of disbelief hasn't quite faded, but the part of him that's always yearned for something more, something beyond the monotony of his job, starts to push through the doubt. With a quiet resolve, he pulls on his jacket and heads out the door, clutching the card tightly in his hand. There's something about the way Elon spoke, the way his words didn't feel forced or scripted, that makes him believe this isn't just another empty offer. Maybe this is the real deal. As he walks into the gas station, Chris can't shake the nervous energy bubbling inside him. The familiar sounds of the station, tires on gravel, the low hum of the pumps, feel surreal this morning. The space that once seemed so ordinary now feels like the backdrop of something much bigger. His hands are busy, adjusting the small stack of papers on the counter, but his mind is elsewhere, running over the conversation from last night. Elon had said, "You don't need a fancy title or a degree to make a difference." That thought circles in Chris's mind, giving him a strange sense of confidence. It's one thing to believe in your abilities. It's another when someone like Elon Musk sees potential in you. Just as Chris is lost in thought, the bell above the door rings. He looks up, half expecting to see a customer, but instead it's Elon again, standing in the doorway. The tall figure looks just as out of place here as he did last night. But this time, there's a clear sense of purpose in his stride. No fanfare, no distractions, just a straightforward, confident presence. "Morning, Chris," Elon greets, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips as he steps inside. Chris stands up straight, his stomach doing a flip. "Hey, morning," he stammers. The sudden reality of the situation hits him harder now in this face-to-face meeting. He feels out of his depth, unsure of what to say or how to act. The gravity of last night's conversation feels even more surreal in the light of day. Elon glances at the counter, taking a moment to look around. "You've been thinking about our conversation, I hope," he asks casually, his tone light, but with an edge of genuine curiosity. Chris hesitates for a moment, his hands fidgeting with the corner of a receipt. "Yeah, I have," he admits, his voice quieter than he intended. "I'm just not sure where to start. It feels like such a big jump, you know." Elon nods, his expression sympathetic but unwavering. "It is a big step, but sometimes those are the ones that matter the most." His eyes lock onto Chris's, and for a brief second, Chris sees something in Elon's gaze, an understanding. He knows what it's like to make a leap of faith, to trust in something bigger than yourself. Chris can feel the weight of Elon's words pressing on him, a challenge he's never really faced before. He's always played it safe, stayed in the shadows, hidden behind the excuse that he wasn't enough or that he didn't belong. But now, it feels like all those barriers are starting to crumble, one by one. "What makes you think I can do this?" Chris blurts out, unable to contain the doubt that still lingers in his mind. Elon's smile deepens, and he takes a small step closer. "Because you already are. You built something on your own, without guidance, without the usual resources, and that's rare. Most people wait for the world to give them permission to succeed. You didn't." Chris absorbs the words, his mind racing. Elon's confidence in him isn't something that can be easily dismissed. The enormity of the decision starts to feel less like a weight and more like a potential waiting to be tapped into. After a long pause, Chris looks up, meeting Elon's gaze. "So, what do I need to do?" he asks, his voice steady now, no longer hesitant. Elon leans back slightly, hands in his pockets, and gives Chris a thoughtful look. "First, you start by believing that you have something to offer. Then, we take it from there. Let's see how far we can push this idea of yours, and if you're willing to take the risk, we'll make it happen." The room feels charged now, as if Chris is standing on the edge of something profound. The doubt, the fear, they still exist, but they are now tempered by a sense of possibility. He's no longer just a guy at a gas station. He's someone who has the chance to build something that could change the future. And for the first time in his life, that future doesn't feel out of reach. "All right," Chris says finally, his voice steady and resolute. "I'm in. Let's see where this goes." Elon's smile widens. "Good, that's the spirit." With that, they shake hands, and in that simple gesture, a new chapter begins for Chris. The weight of the decision settles in him, but this time, it feels like a choice he's finally ready to make. As Elon walks out of the station, Chris stands there for a moment, still processing. The world outside seems brighter now, more open. He's stepping into the unknown, but for the first time, he's not afraid. His journey is just beginning. The days following Chris's decision blur together in a whirlwind of anticipation and doubt. His life, once marked by routine shifts at the gas station, now feels like it's shifting on its axis. There are moments when he feels confident, ready to dive into this unknown future, but just as often, the weight of his decision presses down on him. What have I gotten myself into? Elon, as promised, reaches out. He arranges a meeting at Tesla's headquarters, a place that feels as distant from Chris's former life as the moon. Chris has never been in a place like this, sleek, polished, full of people with titles he doesn't understand. But today is different. Today, he's here, not as an outsider, but as someone invited to see what could be his new reality. And in a strange twist, he can't help but feel both excited and out of place, like an intruder at a party he wasn't sure he was meant to attend. The day arrives and Chris steps out of the taxi in front of Tesla's headquarters, his heart pounding in his chest. The building is imposing, glass and steel, sleek and modern, far from the faded gas station and the small apartment where he spent most of his nights tinkering with code. He takes a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. It's too late to turn back now. Inside, the atmosphere is just as intimidating. He's ushered through high-tech halls, passing teams of engineers who are deep in discussion, their eyes fixed on screens showing complex data and blueprints. Chris feels a rush of anxiety. How could someone like him, who's never set foot in a formal tech environment, possibly fit in? But then, Elon appears, a reassuring smile on his face. "You made it," he says with an easy confidence, as if it's no big deal. He leads Chris into a small conference room where a few engineers are already waiting. The moment Chris walks in, the room falls silent. He can feel their eyes on him, sizing him up in the same way he had sized up Elon when they first met. "Chris," Elon begins, "this is where the magic happens." He gestures to the group, his voice filled with pride. "These guys are working on some of the most advanced tech in the world. And now, we want to hear your ideas. Tell us what you've got." The sudden shift in dynamic is overwhelming. Chris stands at the front of the room, feeling the weight of the moment. But something in Elon's calm demeanor gives him the confidence to speak up. "Well, I've been working on an AI prototype," Chris starts, his voice slightly shaky at first. "It's a self-learning system. It adapts to input over time and becomes smarter the more data you give it. It's not much yet, but it works." The engineers exchange glances, some intrigued, others skeptical. But then one of them, a middle-aged man with glasses, speaks up. "You're saying this AI learns on its own, without manual adjustments?" His tone is skeptical, but intrigued. Chris nods, his eyes fixed on the screen in front of him. "Yes, the idea is that over time it'll be able to handle more complex tasks and adjust its processes without human interference. The more it interacts with its environment, the better it gets." There's a moment of silence in the room as everyone processes the idea. Elon looks thoughtful, nodding slowly as he listens. Finally, he speaks. "It's a powerful concept. There's huge potential here. But, Chris, what we're looking for isn't just an idea. We need to see it in action. We need results." Chris swallows hard. His nerves are running wild, but there's a fire inside him now, fueled by the challenge. "I've got a working prototype," he says, "but it's basic. It's far from perfect, but I can show you how it works." He pulls out his laptop and connects it to the projector. As the screen lights up, the engineers crowd around, their eyes narrowing in concentration. For the first time since he stepped into the room, Chris feels like he belongs. He begins explaining the interface, demonstrating how the AI adapts to input. There's no magic trick, just the raw power of his creation. The engineers watch, and their skepticism starts to melt away. Elon watches quietly from the side, his arms crossed but his expression unreadable. Chris's hands move confidently now, guiding the group through the system he's built, showing them its potential. And when the AI successfully adjusts to a new input, a murmur of approval ripples through the room. Chris can feel the tension lift, replaced by something else: excitement, maybe even awe. The moment the demonstration is over, Elon claps lightly. "That," he says, his voice carrying authority, "is impressive. You've got something here, Chris?" A mix of pride and disbelief washes over Chris. It's one thing to have faith in your own work, but it's another when people who live and breathe this technology start to see it too. Elon turns to the engineers. "This is the kind of thinking we need," he says. "We're going to give Chris the resources to take this further. This is just the beginning." As the meeting winds down, Elon pulls Chris aside. "I've been around a lot of smart people," Elon says quietly, "but you've got something different. I knew you had potential from the moment we met. We're going to do great things together." Chris stands there, his mind racing. He came here as an outsider, unsure if he even belonged in this world. But now, with Elon's words in his ears and the approval of the team around him, the future feels suddenly within his grasp. Later that day, as Chris walks out of Tesla's headquarters, the weight of the world feels a little lighter. He's no longer just a self-taught coder working late into the night in a small gas station. He's someone whose work has the potential to change the future. The journey ahead isn't easy. There's still so much to learn, so much to prove. But for the first time, Chris believes it's possible. And that belief, more than anything else, is what will drive him forward. The following weeks move in a blur. Chris finds himself back at Tesla's headquarters more often than not, surrounded by a team of brilliant engineers, developers, and designers, all dedicated to pushing the boundaries of what he'd created. His AI prototype, once just a concept born out of late-night tinkering at the gas station, is now a real project with a future that feels more tangible each day. But with that realization comes pressure, and Chris feels the weight of it. There are days when the task ahead seems insurmountable. His lack of formal education often makes him feel like an imposter in a room full of highly qualified professionals. Even with the knowledge he's gained through years of self-study, the environment at Tesla is still intimidating. Its advanced technology a constant reminder of how far he's come, and how far he still has to go. One afternoon, after another round of intense meetings, Chris finds himself in Elon's office, facing the man who's made it all possible. The room is sleek, minimalist, with large windows that offer a panoramic view of the campus below. Elon stands by his desk, reviewing some documents, but he looks up as Chris enters, offering a smile that, while brief, feels genuine. "Hey, Chris, I know you've been working hard," Elon says as he motions for Chris to take a seat. "How are you holding up?" Chris exhales slowly, sinking into the chair. It's a lot to process. Some days it feels like I'm still trying to catch up. I didn't expect things to move this fast. It's been great, but sometimes I wonder if I'm even good enough to be here. Elon sets the papers aside, leaning back in his chair. His gaze is steady, considering before he speaks. "Let me tell you something," he begins, his voice calm but firm. "When I first started, there were plenty of people who thought I was out of my mind. People told me I couldn't do it. But I kept going, because I believed in what I was building, and I knew that if I surrounded myself with the right people, we'd get there together." Chris listens intently, the weight of Elon's words slowly sinking in. The confidence in Elon's voice has always been present, but hearing it directed at him is something different. It's not just about the technology now. It's about the people, about belief. "You're not here because of luck, Chris," Elon continues. "You're here because you've got something rare. That's what I saw in you from the beginning. And it's not just about the code you write or the algorithms you build. It's your mindset, the way you approach problems. You've got a way of thinking that most people don't." Chris feels a flush of pride, but also a surge of doubt. "I get that. But what if I'm just pretending? What if all of this is too much? Maybe I've gone too far and I don't really belong here." Elon shakes his head, his eyes never leaving Chris. "That's exactly why you belong here. Because you're willing to ask yourself those questions. Because you push yourself further than most people would ever dare. But you don't do it alone, and you don't have to do it alone." There's a pause, the air thick with anticipation. Chris looks at Elon, trying to read the unspoken words in his expression. Elon leans forward, a serious look now taking over his face. "I want you to lead this project, Chris," Elon says, his voice unwavering. "Not as a junior member of the team, not as a cog in the machine. I want you to take charge. Your vision, your ideas, they're what will drive this forward. And if you're ready, I'll give you the resources to make it happen." The words hang in the air, and Chris can barely breathe for a moment. The weight of the offer is almost too much to comprehend. Leading the project? He's never even considered himself as someone who could be in charge of anything, let alone something this monumental. "Are you serious?" Chris finally asks, his voice barely above a whisper. The disbelief in his tone is clear, even to himself. This isn't just a job offer. It's a chance to shape the future. Elon smiles, a small but meaningful curve of his lips. "I've never been more serious about anything. You've got what it takes, Chris. It's time you stopped doubting yourself." Chris's mind races. A flood of thoughts crashes through him. Self-doubt, excitement, fear, and an overwhelming sense of disbelief. For so long, he had just been trying to make it to the next day, unsure if his self-taught skills would ever take him anywhere. But here, in this moment, with Elon offering him the opportunity to lead, everything changes. "All right," Chris says, his voice steadier now, but his heart is pounding in his chest. "I'm in. Let's do it." Elon's smile deepens. "I knew you would be." As Chris stands to leave the office, the weight of the decision settles over him, but this time it feels different. There's no hesitation, no second guessing. He's ready. For the first time, he feels like he belongs here, not because of his background or his lack of a degree, but because of the work he's done, the ideas he's brought to the table, and the trust Elon has placed in him. As he walks out of the office, a new chapter of his life begins. And for the first time, Chris doesn't feel like an imposter. He feels like a leader. The journey ahead will be difficult. There will be setbacks, challenges, and moments of doubt. But for Chris, the path is clear. And with each step forward, he knows he's not alone anymore. He has a team, a mentor, and most importantly, the belief in himself that he never had before. Chris spends the next few days in a haze of activity. There's so much to learn, so much to prove, but for the first time, he doesn't feel overwhelmed by it. The weight of Elon's offer is now a driving force, not a burden. Every morning, He wakes up earlier than he ever did when he worked at the gas station, eager to dive into the work, to make something of himself that he never thought possible. And yet, even as his days are packed with meetings, brainstorming sessions, and long hours in front of his laptop, there are moments when doubt creeps back in, when he questions if he's truly capable of leading the project. But each time that doubt surfaces, he reminds himself, "I'm here because I've earned this." And with every step forward, every piece of code he refines, every conversation with Elon, that belief grows stronger. One afternoon, after a particularly intense meeting with his new team, Chris finds himself in the quiet solitude of the small office space he's been assigned. The room, like everything else at Tesla, is sleek and modern, much more than he ever expected. The high-tech equipment, the walls lined with screens displaying real-time data, all of it feels so far from the dusty counter of the gas station. But in this space, with the hum of machines and the soft clicks of his keyboard filling the silence, he feels a sense of purpose. Elon stops by the office, knocking gently before entering. There's a warmth in his demeanor, but also a sharp focus that Chris has come to recognize. Elon's eyes fall on Chris's screen, where the AI system is running through its latest iteration. "You've made progress," Elon says, a subtle but genuine note of approval in his voice. Chris glances at Elon, feeling the weight of his gaze, but also the quiet pride in it. "I think we're getting close to something big," Chris replies, his voice filled with conviction. It's not the tentative uncertainty he felt in the early days, but a quiet confidence that's growing within him. Elon leans against the doorframe, his arms crossed. "You've got the right mindset, but remember, the real challenge comes now. Making this work is one thing, but scaling it, refining it for real-world applications, that's where the magic happens." Chris nods, absorbing the weight of Elon's words. "I know. It's daunting, but I'm ready for it." Elon studies him for a moment, then smiles. "Good. You've got a team behind you, Chris. Don't forget that. You're not in this alone." The reassurance is subtle, but it lands deeply within Chris. It's the reminder he needs, the one that pushes him to keep going even when the path ahead seems uncertain. For the first time, he feels like he's not just part of something, he's leading it, and that shift, from doubting himself to stepping into his role with confidence, is both exhilarating and terrifying. Later that evening, as Chris leaves the office, he steps out into the cool night air, taking a moment to breathe. The campus is quiet now, the once bustling halls of Tesla calming down as employees begin to wrap up their day. He walks past the sleek buildings, feeling a sense of belonging that wasn't there before. In these halls, he's no longer the outsider. He's a part of something bigger, a catalyst for change in a company that's shaping the future. His thoughts drift back to that first night at the gas station, when he had no idea where this journey would take him. It feels like a lifetime ago, and yet, in a way, it's only just beginning. Chris takes out his phone, staring for a moment at Elon's business card still stored in his contacts. The simple message, "Think about it. No rush. This could be a game changer for you. It seems like a lifetime ago that it was just a possibility. But now, as Chris stands here at the threshold of a new chapter, that message feels more like a prophecy fulfilled." He taps out a quick text to Elon. "Thanks for believing in me. I won't let you down." As he hits send, he feels a small wave of gratitude wash over him. For the first time, the future feels open and full of promise. There are still hurdles to overcome, still challenges ahead. But Chris knows one thing for certain. He's ready for them. With a final glance at the stars above, Chris turns and walks back into the building. A new beginning is here, and he's no longer the man who worked at a gas station. He's someone who's on the verge of changing the world.